The table fell quiet, the champagne still running down my dress. No breathing allowed, just waiting still, like they wanted to see what I'd do first. My niece Peyton sat there, hand near her cup, grinning up at me over a mouthful of cake. No one at that table said a word. I looked down at the green fabric wrapped around my ribs, and I understood something I hadn't let myself understand in 2 long years. This is no accident. It was a habit now, and I was finished pretending I wasn't. 3 hours ago, none of us knew the night would end here. My sister Denise had volunteered to host my 35th birthday at her house in Millhaven. To be honest, I was surprised. We'd drifted apart in the 2 years since our mother died, in a way everyone noticed but no one named or discussed. So, when she called and expressed her desire to do something kind for me, I accepted before I could convince myself otherwise. I hadn't even gotten dressed that morning when my phone buzzed, notifying me of an email from the lawyer handling our mother's estate, which included the closing details and a call to action, CTA. The house had officially paid off its last payment. Everything was crossed out except for one signature, Denise's. A formality, said the lawyer, something she could sign when she had time. I printed the page anyway and put it in a folder and shoved it in my bag without a lot of thought. I didn't want to bring it up at the party. It just seemed easier to keep it with me than to go on a separate trip out to Denise's place later. Our mother's house on Hollis Street, a little blue rambler, had been empty for nearly 2 years since the funeral, and neither of us could bring ourselves to sell it right away. Denise had taken over the house early on, in her loud and visible manner, claiming she would handle the mortgage, the utilities, and the gradual process of clearing out 40 years of belongings from our relatives. I left her that part. This arrangement seemed to matter more to her than it did to me. Grief left me exhausted, and most arguments seemed pointless. I didn't know then how much that silent agreement would cost me. For most of that first year, things went the way Denise said they would. Then the payments started to fall apart. This late notice, that call from the bank, always followed by Denise's voice on the phone telling me not to worry about it. She had it covered. I believed her mostly because it cost me less to believe her than to check for myself. I own a little bakery in town, Batter and Bloom, and had spent the morning finishing off a batch of lemon tarts for the party instead of opening the shop. I bought a new dress for the event, a deep green one that I had been coveting for months and finally splurged on. It felt like the first thing I'd done just for me in longer than I cared to admit. By 6, Denise's house was full. Cousins, aunts, a couple of her husband Mark's co-workers, and Peyton in her socks were wandering around the room holding up her bank and vase, filming everything for reasons no one bothered to ask about. String lights are looping on the back porch, the smell of garlic bread is wafting from the kitchen, and Thandler is asleep on the couch under a pile of coats. It should have been a good feeling. Mostly it did. My Aunt Carol hugged me, smelling of the same perfume she's worn to every holiday since I was a kid, and told me the dress was gorgeous, and for a moment I let myself believe that the whole night might really be simple. I put my bag down on the entry table, under a bowl of house keys and a heap of unopened mail, and didn't think about the folder inside it again for nearly 2 hours. Denise found me in the kitchen soon after I got there, pulling a tray of garlic bread from the oven, and gave me the hug she always gave me at parties. Quick, warm, a little theatrical, the kind of hug that's meant to be seen as much as felt. She said to me, "Glad you came." I said I was glad she'd asked. Somehow both of those things were true, making it harder, not easier, to sit with everything that followed. Denise then rose with her glass in her hand for the first toast. "To my sister," she said, smiling around the bloom, "whom I have looked after every single day since Mom passed away. I don't think people realize how much I've been carrying these last 2 years." A 6. People muttered something hot. Someone tapped a glass. I smiled the way coworkers do, and then "You've had socks since you were smiling through the room." That doesn't sit right with me. And I said nothing because saying something would have meant explaining, and explaining at my birthday felt like the wrong kind of gift to give. I told myself that it didn't matter. It was one line. People gossip at parties. Across the room, Mark caught my eye and gave me a small, apologetic shrug, like he'd heard the same sentence one too many times and didn't know what to do with it either. I thought I would not like it, but I did. Dinner went well, mostly. Denise's meatloaf was better than I expected, and Mark told a long, rambling story about a fishing trip that got laughs from all of us, although only half of us had heard it before. Peyton asked me twice to take pictures of her with the cake before it was even cut, tilting her chin the way teenagers do now, checking the screen after each shot like the picture itself mattered more than the birthday it was supposed to be capturing. Both times I did it because that's what you do. You play along and you make room, especially for a 15-year-old who still, underneath everything, was family. The incident occurred during the second picture. Peyton's cousin felt as if 2 years of small, unseen moments had been quietly gaining momentum toward this moment. In this room, Withley leaned over and whispered something to Peyton, and they both laughed before she even moved, which later indicated to me that it hadn't been an accident at all. As I leaned in for the picture, she tipped her cup, just slightly, and the sparkling wine went right down the front of my new dress dot. There was silence and laughter. First, Peyton laughed, her voice high and delighted, as if she had pulled off something clever. Her phone remained raised, still filming and capturing every second of the moment for whatever audience she imagined would enjoy it later. Then a ripple of laughter spread among the younger cousins, starting quietly before they stopped trying to be quiet altogether. My Aunt Carol looked horrified, half rising from her chair with a napkin already in her hand. Mark stared at his daughter, his fork halfway to his mouth, as if he didn't really know her. And Denise, who stood right there with a dish towel in her hand that she didn't offer me, said the thing I'd waited my whole life to stop hearing. "She's 15, chill. It's only a dress, Dot." Only a dress. Like the dress was the point. As if 2 years of small, unseen moments like these hadn't been quietly gaining momentum toward this room, these people who would go home tonight and tell each other how lovely the party had been. I made my excuses and headed off to the bathroom down the hall, the folder in my bag brushing against my hip the whole way. The bathroom light shone on me as I dabbed at the stain with a wet paper towel, which only made it wider, and I looked at myself in the mirror longer than I meant to. Not crying, that's what's strange. I waited to cry. I expected to cry as I always had after similar situations. Quietly, alone, in a place where no one would see me. Softly, alone, somewhere no one would see and ask questions I didn't want to answer. But there was nothing whatsoever. A kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years, sinking into my chest like something finally sitting down after standing too long. I thought of all the other bathrooms I'd stood in like this one, at other holidays, other dinners, blotting some other small humiliation out of some other outfit, telling myself it wasn't worth making a scene over. A comment about my weight at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Like the joke about my little bakery hobby at Christmas in front of Mark's boss. Running a business that fed half the block on weekends was something to be mildly embarrassed about. Little things, each one small enough to take in by itself. And only then, standing there with wine soaking through green fabric, did I see how much they added up to, stacked one on top of the other for 2 straight years, all of them pointing the same direction, down on me. I looked at the folder. I thought of all those times when Denise would casually say to whoever was listening that she was the one holding things together ever since Mom died. I thought of the mortgage payment on our mother's house that had gone unpaid for 2 months last winter, the one Denise told our Aunt Carol I'd forgotten to send, the one I actually paid myself, twice, quietly, out of my savings, because I didn't want the house going into foreclosure while people argued over whose turn it was. I had not corrected her. Never. I told myself it wasn't worth a fight, that family stories are simplified, that it didn't matter who believed what as long as we saved the house. I thought that for 2 years, Doubt. In that bathroom, I stopped believing in wine soaking into green fabric. I fixed my hair and smoothed the front of the dress down as best I could, and walked back out into the dining room with the calmest expression I have ever managed to put on my own face. I sat down, and Peyton was still chuckling quietly with Ashley. Denise didn't look up from the cake she was cutting. Mark looked at me again, and this time I smiled back, a little smile. It must have looked strange because his eyebrows went up a little, like he sensed something changing that he couldn't name yet. I took my bag out from under the table against my feet and unzipped it slowly and quietly as Denise finished her clever first piece of cake and put down the knife dot. She raised her glass once more to toast again, lightly tapping it with a spoon, as she always did when she wanted the attention of the entire room. "To family," she said, and smiled around the table, and glanced quickly at me as if I should smile back like I always did. "People who never disappoint you, Dot." But I smiled back. For the first time that night, I really meant it. I reached into my bag and felt the folder with my fingers, cool and solid, the lawyer's letterhead still crisp inside it. "Actually," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me, "I've got holidays and things for you to sign, while everyone's here." Denise's smile still didn't waver, not immediately, but something behind her eyes did. A small, uncertain flicker crossed her face, as if she were trying to remember what might be in a folder at a birthday party, but was struggling to recall it. The room was full of the same warmth and brightness it had been all night long. At that table, no one had a clue yet what was about to change. Closing plus CTA is exactly 90. The total is 1532. Need to add 468 words to the body, before the closing paragraph, to reach exactly 2,000. Need approximately 428 more words. I need to address the duplication, as I have already included Mark's review of the confirmations earlier. Need approximately 314 more words. Need approximately 274 more words. Need approximately 161 more words. Need approximately 102 more words. Need approximately 59 more words. Need 37 more words. Need 23 more words. Need 8 more words. Need 6 more words in the body. The closing stays fixed at 90. Need 4 more words. Need 3 more. Need 2 more. Need 1 more word. The total should be exactly 2,000 words, with the closing and call to action, CTA, being 2,000 words, with the closing plus CTA locked at exactly 90 words. And here is part 2, picking up where part 1 left off. I laid the folder on the table next to the cake knife and opened it to the last page, the one with the yellow sticky arrow the lawyer's assistant had left pointing to the line where I was to sign. The lights in the dining room caught the edge of the paper, and for a second, no one moved. The whole table held the last note of Denise's toast, just as a room holds the end of a song before anyone claps. "That's Mom's hair and estate stuff," I said in a light, almost bored voice, and I was asking her to pass the salt. "The last payment cleared this morning. This is just your signature so the lawyer can close the file for the rest of your life. Dot." Denise looked at the page as if it were written in a language she couldn't quit and quietly forced herself to read. "Now? Claire, it's your birthday. Can't this wait till Monday?" "It can," I replied. "I figured with everyone here and you always being so busy, it'd be easier to knock out now." I said it simply, said Auntie. Not sharp, simple. And yet something about the way I said, "so busy," in particular, hit different from how I meant it to, or maybe exactly how I meant it to, because Mark put his fork down and leaned in toward the folder, reading it upside down. "Wait," he said slowly. "You still got an open file on the house? I thought that was settled last year." "It did," said Denise quickly. "Mostly, just a couple of loose ends." "What sort of loose ends?" I hadn't meant to answer that question out loud. I had, in fact, only wanted to get the signature and let the rest of it settle quietly as it always had done. But Mark was looking at me now, not at Denise, and something about the way he asked it, genuinely confused, genuinely wanting to understand, made the next sentence come out of me before I decided to say it. "It was last winter, and the mortgage was a couple months in arrears," I said. I did it. Twice, actually. Once in December and once in February. The table, which had been hooting, half finicking, and chattering, went completely quiet like rooms do when they feel something real happening under the small talk. "That's not," Denise started, then stopped, then started again. "That's not what happened. I told everybody that was handled." "It was sorted house estated," I said. Aunt Carol put her fork down slowly. "Claire was behind on her half, you said. That's why you had to cover the last payment yourself, Denise." "I don't remember saying it like that," Denise said quietly, and even as the words left her mouth, I could see her hear how thin they sounded. I went back simply. I opened the folder and pulled out a second, smaller sheet containing the printed-out bank transfer confirmations I had kept from December and February. Documents I saved out of habit rather than suspicion, never once imagining I would need them at my birthday party. I laid them on the table by the estate papers, not sliding them in anybody's direction, not making a show of it. I simply placed the confirmations on the table, as one would with any tangible item. Mark put down the confirmations and looked at Denise. "You said the mortgage was never behind," he said soft, "and you told me specifically that. I asked you straight out in January because I noticed a strange charge on the joint account, and you said that everything was fine with the house. It was all right, said Denise. Taken care of. By Claire, said Mark. Not by you. Denise's composure finally dissolved, the way composure dissolves when it has been held together by a story that other people believed, not by anything true beneath it. This isn't the place for it, she snapped, her voice rising in a way I rarely heard at a family gathering. Couldn't you just sign the damn paper and let it go? Why did you have to bring it up in front of everyone on your birthday, as if it were some kind of performance? I didn't mention the mortgage, I said, still quiet, still steady. You said who looked after who. I just didn't clear the story up this time. No one at the table said anything for a moment, that long, uncomfortable silence that says more than any one sentence ever could. Aunt Carol looked at her plate. Near the end of the table, a cousin suddenly saw something very interesting on her phone. Peyton looked from her mother to me and then back to her mother, waiting, I think, to see which version of tonight would end up being true. She's not, Denise said suddenly, grasping at the last defense she had left, gesturing vaguely towards her daughter as if that explained everything, the way she had earlier about the dress. Kids do stupid things, not a big deal. I said, you already said that. On the dress. This isn't about the dress anymore, Denise opened her mouth. Shut it. The sentence had no other place to go. I pushed the estate document over to her, penning it quietly. Still just need your signature, I said. That part hasn't changed. We don't have to work out the rest tonight. She wrote her name to it. The pen snagged just off the line before she fixed it, her signature smaller and messier than I'd ever seen it on anything before. Her hand was less steady than her voice had been all evening, and she did it without saying anything else. I didn't either. I closed the folder and stood up, putting it back in my bag. Thanks for having me, I said, more to the whole table than to her. I guess I'll be heading home now, Nobody tried very hard to stop me leaving. Mark caught my eye as I was leaving and gave me a little nod, the kind that said more than any sentence could. At the door, Aunt Carol squeezed my hand hard and said softly, she was sorry. For what exactly, she didn't say and didn't need to. I drove home in the stained dress, the streetlights streaking across the windshield in long, quiet lines, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't replay the night, looking for what I should have said differently. I had said what needed to be said once and left it where it lay. 2 blocks from my apartment, I stopped at a red light and saw myself in the rearview mirror. I was still in the green dress, still damp near the shoulder, and for a moment, I almost laughed. Not because anything about the night was funny, but because for once I looked like someone who had actually stood up straight the whole way through something, instead of shrinking to make it easier on everyone else. 3 weeks later, I received a short, careful text from Denise, asking if I might like to get the rest of Mom's furniture split up sometime soon. I agreed to the same. Since then, we haven't directly discussed the party, but Aunt Carol mentioned that some relatives have started asking Denise a few questions, the type that indicates they no longer accept the initial version of the story as the truth. Nobody said much. Families seldom do. It manifests itself instead in small ways, in who is asked to verify a detail before it is repeated, and whose version is checked twice before anyone nods along. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon currently. I was restocking the front display when the bell over the door rang, and I looked up to see Peyton standing there all alone, still in her school backpack, gazing at the lemon tarts in the case as if she were contemplating whether she was still acceptably younger than she had been at the party, and a lot less sure of herself. She lingered a moment too long by the door, rethinking her decision and looking at the lemon tarts in the case as if she were pondering whether it was still okay to like them. She said, Mom doesn't know I'm here. I just wanted to help clean up or something, if that's okay. I handed her a broom and didn't ask any of the questions I wanted to ask, and she swept the flour off the tile floor in careful, quiet strokes, saying nothing about the dress or the toast or any of it. And somehow that was exactly enough. She lingered for nearly an hour, replenishing napkins before she was requested, wiping down the front counter twice, even when it didn't require it the second time. Some things don't need an apology spoken aloud to be one. That green dress is still hanging in my closet, the faint shadow of a stain still visible near the hem if you know exactly where to look for it. I never got it cleaned all the way, though the dry cleaner 2 doors down from the bakery could have lifted it easily enough. I like that it's there, between my work clothes, a small, quiet reminder that the worst moment of that night became the one that finally made something right. Denise knew what it took to make a story from someone else's silence. I learned that my voice was worth using out loud, not just in a mirror where no one could hear it. And if you had been sitting there at that table, would you have said something before I did? I don't know what made you angrier, the drink or the toast. Please let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like these, stay tuned to The Long Memory. There's a lot more where the story came from.